You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we challenge the status quo of the food industry, celebrate good food founders who are building businesses on their own terms, introduce industry disruptors, and are redefining equitability. If you're ready to build your financial confidence and join the good food revolution to change the way the food industry does business, you are in the right place. I'm the Good Food CFO and your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I'm excited to welcome the founder and CEO of Mable, Arik Keller. Mable is a B2B wholesale platform designed to make it easy for grocery and convenience stores to discover and buy emerging and local food brands. In 2018, Arik bought a small corner store in New England. At the time, it seemed like an easy break from technology startups, but he quickly learned how hard it was to discover and buy all the unique brands he wanted to bring into his store. He learned that his mainline distributors were more focused on moving current products than introducing new items, and he discovered how many hoops small brands had to jump through to get into these big distributors. So in 2019, Mable was born and now connects thousands of stores across the country with unique emerging grocery brands. Arik and I are discussing his mission to get good food on more shelves, how his technology background shaped his approach to building out Mable's B2B platform, what the near future holds for the company, and how they are expanding their business model to become a much needed bridge between business to business and national distribution for CPG brands. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. Let's get to it. Arik, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm really jazzed to be talking with you today. I feel like this is a conversation that's been a long time in the making, and I'm so glad our calendars finally meshed up.
Yes, I'm sorry it took us so long. We were back and forth the first quarter of the year, I think. Well,
Yes.
super busy.
Yes, if we were like up to other things, right?
Yeah. Right.
I have heard a little bit about your background. You're the CEO and founder of Mable, but your path to starting the business I find really fascinating. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about your journey with us.
Yeah. It's a fun story. I've been in tech startups for what seems like forever. And in 2018, I bought myself a rundown little corner store in New England. It's actually up in Vermont. It was a place that I had driven by for 7 or 8 years. And if you and I were driving by it, we'd try to convince the other one to buy it, right? Like this place, someone should turn this place into, as a 20-year-old rundown store. Someone should buy that place and fix it up.
Yeah.
Famous last words. And, I thought, how hard could this be? I'm just going to do this on the side to take a little break from technology. And called some friends who had owned retail stores, and they warned me not to do it. And of course, I'm doing it. So I bought this 20-year-old store. It's a mini grocery store, almost like a convenience store, but it was a pretty rundown place. Packed up and went to the New York fancy food show within 2 weeks.
Wow. And
started discovering all these brands and talking to them and telling them about this new store that I'm fixing up. And they would hand me their pamphlets and PDFs, and I'd ask them, how do I get your stuff? Because we had at the time, and still do, use KeHE. And, they would say, well, we can sell direct, or we're not in the the distribution center for KeHE in New England, or there's a lot of challenges when I got back to my desk to be able to buy all these brands that I discovered. Mm. And so that's when kind of the light bulb went off. We were already buying direct from a bunch of little brands in Vermont, but we wanted to expand that. And so in 2019, went back to some investors I'd worked with in the past, and we raised around a capital to essentially build that, a two-sided marketplace that helps initially small independent stores easily discover and buy from emerging local brands.
Yeah.
And I still own the store today. It's definitely a lot harder than I thought, but it's a great platform for us to test and learn over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. We have a couple of parallels, maybe one parallel. I have never worked in tech. I too dreamt of having, I actually just shared this on Instagram not long ago. I dreamt of owning an independent grocery store. I thought this is what my future will be. I attempted to do so in 2010 with a co-founder, backed out of the lease. It was like the worst lease agreement ever. They were basically like, you could sell produce and that's it. Like, cause it was in like a kind of a, not a community space, but like a multi-retail kind of space. And we wanted to do produce and packaged goods, and we wanted to do proteins and just the beautiful store that you dream of, right, in your head. They were like, no, produce only. Like, we cannot make any money selling produce only. Like, we are out of here. So yeah, so we did a pop-up for 2 years, and it was grueling and amazing.
Yes.
But we learned a lot, and it really informed what I do now. But I was a buyer, in that role for 2 years, and then I went on to be a buyer for a large catering company after that. And just the insights into the industry and how it all works is just so fascinating.
Yeah. It's a frustratingly slow industry, but it's super fun as well. It's food. We can relate to it every day, and all of our employees relate to it every day, and so it got a gravitational pull to it.
Some. So how long did it take you to get it up and running?
Mable?
Yeah.
So, boy, we raised some capital in the middle of 2019 and hired some people I'd worked with in the past from PayPal and the Boston area, Wayfair, like brought in e-commerce, retail DNA. And it took us a year to build the platform, essentially building this whole B2B wholesale platform from the ground up, designed for grocery. And, there's been other emerging marketplaces, certainly, that have gone more horizontal across a bunch of different verticals. We have been very focused on just going deep in grocery and really understanding grocery and meeting the needs of food and beverage brands and stores.
I love that.
So we launched in, we soft launched in 2020. The pandemic hit. We were a 9-person team that went fully remote. So most of the employees we've hired, we're a 20-person team now. We've been sort of in a hybrid model. But it took us a good year to build the foundation.
Yeah. And so your initial intention, from what I'm hearing, was to really enable independent grocers to connect with brands that weren't yet or maybe didn't plan to sell through traditional distribution.
That's right. Right. We were learning about the early stages that brands have and the challenges they have in moving into distribution. And we can talk about distributors later on today. We never had the intention of disintermediating distributors or becoming a distributor. We actually have had, in the last 3 years, that's a hard part of the business. And so we're actually really trying to befriend and enable distributors, but at the right time for brands. So we see ourselves as just what you said, which is giving the brand an easy new direct channel to allow stores to buy fast and test and learn. But ultimately, those brands are going to grow up and move into mainline distribution. And we see ourselves playing a role in that too.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I want to talk about that a little bit, because from the financial side of things, and with some of the folks that I work with, they don't have an intention of going to mainstream distribution. And it's for a couple of different reasons. Some just don't want to be that size brand, right? They don't feel the need to have sort of like a far and wide reach necessarily. The other is that the margins on their particular product aren't large enough to work with traditional distribution. And I think it's like multifold is not the right word, but there, for a couple of different reasons, right? I talk a little bit about this on the podcast, that there's sort of an artificially low price of food in standard grocery, right? And so when you're dealing with small brands, especially those that are using really good ingredients, right? Maybe they're sourcing locally or they're sourcing domestically or whatever it might be, and they're keeping sustainability in mind. They're paying their team fair wages. and doing so, throughout the supply chain. When we go to market and we ask the real price that we need to for that product, it's high. And
Yes.
to build in additional margin to go through distribution, it's like the market hasn't caught up. Consumers, right, haven't caught up or aren't able to pay that real price.
Yep.
And I see that as a major roadblock.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this. So there's a couple of things. There's a massive chicken and egg problem on most of what you're saying, which is, but park that for a second. There's just different types of brands. Some want to be a small batch, $1 million company. I only want to sell to Erewhon and high-end stores, and that's my business. And that's great business. And there are other brands that I think want to go beyond that. And then there are others that want to be in, 7-Eleven or Kroger or Sprouts.
Yeah.
And we're trying to really appeal to all stages there. Because, one of our missions as a company is, let's make this better food more widely available.
Yeah, I love that.
Give these brands this channel. If they want to sell to just my little store up in Vermont and a bunch of other stores like that, great. But if it's so good and well made and, can displace a product eventually in a C-store that has high fructose corn syrup and a bunch of other crappy ingredients, let's help them do that too. And that's when that product that's already on the shelf that has those bad ingredients and this new competing product become a little bit closer in parity with price. But yes, mostly we are representing these brands that are doing a better job with better ingredients, and they're sustainable and they're paying attention to things that some of these large CPG brands are not. But yeah, so I think, to get back to your question, like there's just different brands at different stages in their life cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with different visions as well.
Yes.
And, when I became aware of Mable and some platforms that are doing sort of similar things within and outside of grocery, I really thought this is so cool. And this is so beneficial because, I use the word disrupt, and I use that word because it's sort of changing the game a bit, right? It's not D2C or distribution, right? With a small opportunity, as you were describing, for like very close local stores to order from the brand. This opens up an avenue where you can ship to an independent grocer across the country from you. So you could be technically a national brand working with stores that are directly aligned with, say, your mission or the vision that you have from the business. So that's why I think I put it in some of our communications. I do view Mable as a disruptor because I think it gives brands an opportunity to expand what they might dream their business to be, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah. And I think we help them, again, go to market really fast. We can get a brand onboarded in a couple of days, fully vetted and ready for a certain segment. Oh, you want to go after small corner stores in New England? Okay, you're ready for that. You want to go after bigger grocery or large convenience chain? Well, we have to work through, what are the sort of milestones you need to achieve to get there.
So this is really interesting, and I want to dive into that a little bit, but I'm afraid we should back up a little bit in case there happens to be someone listening who doesn't know what Mable is.
Yes.
Can you describe it for us?
Yeah. So today, we are a marketplace and a procurement platform that enables stores around the country to easily discover and buy from local, emerging, sustainable brands. So we have over 2,000 active stores, nearly 3,000 active brands on the platform. And in the first 3 years of the business, we were very focused on little stores like mine, that little store that has a mainline distributor, but is eager to differentiate and eager to support local and all these other sort of brand attributes that are emerging. And so we successfully built that business. And then at the tail end of last year, it's funny, we went to NACS, which I'd never been to. It was quite eye-opening. And we were hearing a lot of themes at NACS about the C-store space. We were getting some inbound from that space. There's 140,000 C-stores in the country. Most of them carry not such great food, but there's some macroeconomic things happening there. Gas sales are going down. Tobacco sales are going down. There's 140,000 small footprint stores that sort of need to start to reinvent themselves and bring in a new consumer like you and I, who might drive up to a gas pump our gas and then leave because we know what's inside.
Yeah.
We started dabbling in that space. And that led us to like the whole whole C-store space, college and universities, hospitality, anywhere those small format stores exist. So today we've started to evolve in what we call sort of going up market, and feel we've made good penetration in the small independent stores, but we see an opportunity to achieve our mission by putting better food, making better food more widely available. Let's try to find the brands that want to expand beyond the small corner store. And let's find the C-stores that are looking at their shelves and the things on their shelves and kind of shaking their head and saying, we need to change our business a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we actually have some I wish we could talk about today, but we can't yet. It's not yet done, but we have some really interesting partnerships happening where we're actually going to align ourselves with some of the distributors in grocery and C-store space and help them help their customers test and learn fast before moving some of these brands into mainline distribution.
That's fascinating. I'm going to have to invite you back for when that conversation is allowed to happen. Because I was going to ask how to help the brands move through the process. You kind of touched on that a little bit, that seems to be part of your mission. Now, can you provide any kind of insight into what Mable does to support that growth and transition?
Yeah, we can help the brand get their data ready and their products and help them evaluate the categories that are growing fast using data and some of these upmarket opportunities like grocery and C-store.
Okay.
We're not the company that's going to like help them find a new co-packer or like how do you scale from 100 stores to 2,000 stores?
Yeah.
We're trying to identify some of the brands that already have that DNA and really want to get their better made food more widely available.
Yeah.
We're trying to create the demand, which is these partnerships, narrow down on the right supply, but we're saying to these suppliers, hey, brands, like if you want to participate in our upmarket program where you might get picked up by a large C-store, they might start small and we'll work with you to grow, but you got to be prepared for these larger accounts.
Yeah, that's really exciting. It's an evolution of the industry that's exciting to see, because one of the things that we bump up against sometimes when we're transitioning, for example, one of my clients is onboarded with KeHE, and I've never worked directly with KeHE as a financial consultant, but my clients do. And we hear a lot of stories about them in the industry. One of the things that was very true when my client was onboarding was they had to open all DCs. Yep. And the client is like, we're only trying to be in this area. We want one DC. This is what we are capable of doing. This is the size and the scope. And KeHE's like, all or nothing.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of fear that like, what do we do if an order from another DC comes in?
Yeah.
Say, well, we refuse it and we dialogue with them and, make sure they understand why we can't fill that order, and it's a difficult thing. And I think that there's a bit of fear because there was hesitation on the part of that client. Like, do we move forward with this? And so I think, having there be what sounds like a little bit, I don't want to call it middle ground, but I'll use that word.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. We've recently termed it pre-distribution, sort of like, hey, we can be the pre-distribution model for all these brands. Because, you're right that we could talk about unifying KeHE and big distributors for a whole another episode.
Yeah.
I have, and I've heard plenty of brands tell us horror stories or challenges with working with large distributors. The thing I have a newfound appreciation for is how hard that business is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, toward some of these distribution centers for these major distributors, become friends with them and talk to them over the last few, number of years. I think they've all tried to help small emerging brands, but it's not what they're good at. They're good at moving a lot of food to a lot of places. And so what's interesting is what's emerging is, oh, wow, there's this interesting drop ship model which is what I should have explained, which is what Mable is, right? My store can discover this granola in Maine and order a case and have the case at the doorstep within 3 days. And as that scales, I might call my regional distributor and say, hey, this granola is doing really well. Would you buy pallets and try to distribute it to more? Like, we're trying to be an enabler and all that, because I think large distributors are going to be challenged with, one, the pre-distribution phase of brands, and two, we're really good at building tech. And so we can build all the tech that makes all this easy. You should drop ship this. You should parcel ship these brands together. You should buy pallets and ship directly out of these DCs. I think if we can build enough supply and demand, we can be a good partner for these distributors and try to alleviate a lot of the pain points that these brands have had.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point in that distributors are designed to move a lot of product. I think that that's a point that like needs to be echoed and heard, because you're right. There is a lot of negativity or sort of, a lot of dialogue in the industry among small brands about how distributors are unsupportive. But I think another way to think about it is that they're not set up to do it. And it's, it's making me pause for a moment and think about it a bit, but then you say, well, then what? Then how do we do this? And so this idea of the enabler, right? The data, which I think is huge. I love data. So I think that that's amazing. And the fact that if the distributor is willing to be more strategic in how they could onboard the smaller brand, it changes the game. And something I've been saying probably behind the scenes more than in front of the scenes is we need to be talking with these large distributors more to figure out, how do we make this work, and how do we support the smaller brands and progress through their distribution model or setup in a way that works for both businesses.
You got it. And that's what we're saying, which is like, hey, distributors, let us do it. Because what happens is, if my little store calls my mainline distributor and says, hey guys, can you pick up this cool new granola? They're like, yeah, we'll work on it. Right. But they're busy. Right. And so it's sort of like, what we're saying to distributors is, say yes. Like, you'll be able to say yes if you partner with Mable, because what you'll say is, sure, we're going to, they're in our partner network. You're going to be able to order from them direct. And then we'll start evaluating them and looking at the data and deciding if we should take them on as a New England brand. So you got it. I think you're right. I think what you just said is awesome, which is like, let's get these larger distributors engaged in this conversation more, which is what we're doing a lot of right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of good reception, but there are a lot more of them out there to talk to.
Yeah. And feel free to invite me to any of those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just invite myself. But I think, I tell a story about when I was moving from my buyer job. I was sort of out of work for a little bit. I had taken another job and they lost their funding, and they were like, we're so sorry, you don't have a job anymore. I was like, oh, cool. It was 3 days before my job was supposed to start. And so I was exploring different opportunities, and I was approached by a distributor. I specialized in produce. And so I was approached by the head of sales for a distributor that I had purchased from a long time. And he wanted to bring me on board to like sort of build up their local, sustainable produce model. And he had to, get approval from the guys above. And they were like, literally told me, I make way too much money selling conventional strawberries. I have no interest in having you buy and sell local strawberries that I won't make any money on.
Right.
And I think that there's a parallel to that in the small brands within CPG trying to move through distribution, right? They need to move a certain amount of product for it to make sense for them as a distributor.
Yep.
And something I very firmly believe in is that when we start A, having conversations, and B, we become transparent in what do I need? What do you need? And can we find a middle ground where we can connect, right? Or understand how we get from point A to point B, which it sounds like is exactly what you're doing. That's when the opportunity to change the industry
You got
starts
it.
to happen.
Yep. 100%. I think of us as like a virtual extension of a warehouse for a distributor,
Mm,
so
love
we
that.
can add thousands of local emerging brands to a distributor partner of ours.
Yeah.
Because you're right, there's risk. You talked about the risk for the brand and the cost for the brand to get into a distribution center, the slotting fees and all the other fees that are
Yeah.
associated with it. And if it doesn't sell, they got to buy it back. And some of these brands, and I look at those terms and you think, wow, those distributor terms are tough, but there's risk for the distributor as well. And so we can alleviate that risk and essentially, get the brand started in a slower way, a less risky way, I guess.
Yeah. That's really exciting. So that's sort of in the works. It's something that you are in the process of doing and conversations that you're having.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Currently, let's talk about the current model and where you're at today. So you've got a two-sided marketplace, as you called it, where brands can put their products up and make them available to be found by independent stores,
Right.
and purchased. The one thing that interests me about the site is the use of an algorithm. And I understand what algorithms are, and I understand that they're meant to be helpful, but I find it curious how it works on Mable, and how does it benefit the brand in showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said you like data, we
I
love
love
data.
data.
We're always trying to use data from, the activity on our site and sales velocity to do, pretty straightforward personalization. And
Mhm.
so we have not only independent stores, but we'll have, as I mentioned, hotels or CrossFit gyms or coffee shops or you name it, who
Right.
carry any packaged food, come to the site. And so we don't want a CrossFit gym to necessarily land on, the specialty cheese or frozen fish products. And so, we're trying to do our best to personalize that experience. We still have a ways to go. We're very focused on that. People who bought this also bought that. There's
Right.
some things that we're accustomed to as shoppers on Amazon that you can experience on Mable as well. We're very interested in just the procurement space in general in this industry. The way my store buys is pretty low tech. The way a lot of C stores buy is pretty low tech. There's some sort of forecast models in the way these things work, but we have our eye on helping take some of the things we've learned and extend them into these partnerships that we're talking about, so that we want to alert you when we think you might be out of this product. And believe it or not, it's not very sophisticated on the procurement side.
Yeah. Yeah, I've worked in small retail, so I know I know how that works. When I'm thinking about it from the brand perspective, have you seen the article, the Shoppy Shop article?
I think, which one was that?
So I call it the Shoppy Shop article. It was basically like everything in these stores is exactly the same,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I had my issues with that article that I won't get into here, but one of the things that it did talk about was like, social media, there's an algorithm to that. And so something will catch on and everyone will sort of see this same thing. And when we're talking about a CPG product, right, well, then that product becomes popular, and then it's on the shelf of every Shoppy shop.
Yeah.
And they're generally small stores with like a very, boutique kind of selection. I guess my fear around algorithms is that we would end up with all the same stuff, you
Mm.
know, but I imagine that there's a way for people to also search
Yes.
to find product.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a really sophisticated search and browse, experience. We allow drill in by region and then by state. And then I want keto and I want women owned or veteran owned, or, you name the brand value. So, we certainly view ourselves as a discovery platform first, and a commerce platform second. But yes, we haven't seen that. I do remember that article now that you said it. I feel like some of that is based on like candles and other things that are gifty, that are popular on other marketplaces. They're easier to make at high volumes, and so end up in a lot of stores. Whereas, to our earlier conversation, a lot of these brands are smaller and boutique and regional and localized. But you're right. It's a good point as far as, not letting the algorithms do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about how you're supporting brands in the future, and that I really do want to have you back and talk more about the evolution of what you're doing with distribution, because I think it's really exciting. And I think, the ability for independent stores to buy, I mean, going to one place to be able to find a lot of products, place a single order from what I understand, and have all of them shipped to you from different brands is awesome. Because when I was a buyer, I had a list. I mean, I bought from farmers, I bought from cheesemakers, and everyone was independent. And I spent a lot of time, emailing and coordinating orders and all of that. So I totally appreciate the value of a single location.
Yes. Yeah.
As a brand founder or brand representative who's got their product on Mable, can you talk a little bit about what tools you have to help them perhaps find customers and then maintain that business and relationships?
Yeah. So for, the first 3 years of the business, when we were focused on independent stores, which we still are, we built really cool tools in the brand portal. And I'd love to give you a demo of all these things.
I love that.
Brand portal, where a brand can see their orders, edit their products, but they can also send an email and enter, maybe they have a prospect list in Excel and they haven't really kept track of it. We help arm them with prospects maybe in their region. And so they can load those up and send them would you like a free sample? We have a whole sampling feature where, what happens with samples is stores request samples, then the brand never gets feedback. Well, we have a technology that has a feedback loop. A store can't order more than 3 samples until they've given feedback on the first samples they got. So we have these little tools that are just helping with the small independents. This new sort of added strategy, what we call upmarket, going after larger C stores, is certainly a more, as I mentioned, it's early, but we do have, a dozen or so, C stores starting to use our platform. And these are C stores that are 10 locations up to, 100 locations. That's a more consultative sell, we're finding. And so, we're sort of bringing a set of brands, essentially trying to design a beautiful end cap where we go into a C store and say, hey, this is how you should make your impression, right? You guys have been selling these chips, water, and soda forever. Let's make a local impression or a better for you impression. And let's take an entire end cap and put 8 brands there. And so that in that process, we are, leveraging the brands and bringing them along with us and sending samples and connecting the buyer with the seller if we need to. And a lot of discovery is happening on the website, but it morphs into a collaborative approach, because it's a big change to like remove an end cap of Slim Jims and bring in real food. So kind of 2 different strategies we have with helping brands reach the stores.
That's cool. A couple of questions around the sort of like the prospecting bit, because, I'm always talking about with my clients, what's your sales forecast? What is I want to know the energy that's going into it. And, data, like how many people have you reached out to and who have you heard back from? And, just to even try to understand, if I reach out to 10 people, I'll land on shelf at 1 or whatever that data might be. So then we can set action goals, right? And attribute, a forecast of result for that. So I think the ability to prospect through the Mable site is really interesting.
Yep.
And then tell me more about, and maybe we can demo before we leave today, but tell me more about what, is their tracking of like, you've reached out to this person, or kind of what does that look like to facilitate the process?
The tools we built are sort of a beta version of being able to send that communication out to the small store. So we're still building a lot of tools on top of that. We have like a widget a brand can put on their site so that they can instantly, instead of like filling out a credit application, can instantly click on that widget and land on the wholesale page on our site. So we're trying to make the small brand, small store experience easier and with less friction.
I think that's great.
But on the larger stores, it kind of back to this distributor partner model. What we're trying to do by doing that is creating a tremendous amount of demand for our brands. In other words, hey, big distributor, you have 10,000 accounts. They're calling you every month to add a new brand or discover a new, or they want a veteran-owned brand for 4th of July and you don't have it. Like, again, here's a platform you can bolt on to that and send that demand our way to this sort of co-branded partnership.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, going to hopefully alleviate brands having to reach out, because we're going to drive enough demand that there's a lot more shoppers on Mable, big shoppers looking for these types of brands.
Yeah. So it would still be drop ship through Mable, but the delivery would be to the distributor.
It would be directly to store to begin.
Okay.
Scale, that's a great point, like almost cross-docking through that distributor. Really whatever's easiest for the retailer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can we talk about pricing a little bit and sort of the financials of someone selling through Mable?
Yeah. So our revenue model is pretty simple. We take a commission from the brand. So in the same way a distributor takes a commission, we take a commission. It's much less than a distributor because, again, we're not buying the inventory up front and storing it in a warehouse and unpacking it and repacking it and shipping it.
Yeah.
We take between a 10 and 12.5% commission from the brand side. We think there are other ways to monetize this business. We keep coming back to data. We're learning a lot about the current data that's available out there today and how we might expand into that area, but it's early days for that.
Okay. And then, so I'm assuming it's like, if you bring a brand to Mable, we take 10. If a store finds you through Mable, then we take 12.5, kind of a idea.
Yeah, it's evolved a little bit up to 12.5, which is our standard fee right now.
Okay.
But yes, if a brand and a store are already doing business together and they want to move it onto Mable, that's free today.
Okay.
You don't want to, if you've had a year relationship with this brand and we can make your life easier, we'll do it, because we want that brand on the platform to sell to other stores, and we want that store on the platform to discover other brands.
Yeah.
So
are there benefits for shipping? Like, is there any benefit that, because shipping is shipping, right? Whether you're doing it through Mable or not, the process to the brand still looks like pretty similar, but are there any cost savings or partnerships on that end?
Shipping is shipping. That's good. That's a good way to put it. It is a hard part of this business model. We have designed some really interesting free shipping program that we really only extend to brands that honestly have economical shipping costs. So we do have things like frozen fish and big, heavy jars of marinara sauce on our site. Sometimes those are economical to ship. Sometimes they're not.
Right.
Some brands are much better at it than others. And so for the first 3.5 years of the business, we had a free shipping model for design for those brands in our better stores, our best stores. But we actually starting to evolve that as we move up market into potentially a lot of chains and what we call landed cost.
Okay.
And so we're bundling the sort of wholesale cost and the shipping cost together. There's some technology reasons why we need to do that, because some of these upmarket opportunities we're working on, we're getting fully integrated into their back end. So we're, that initiative is causing us to be more like a distributor and making orders happen fast via EDI and things like that. But this landed cost model honestly takes the sort of uncertainty out of the model. Like, shipping costs fluctuate, and sometimes on other marketplaces you order something and you get a shipping cost that's 50% of the cost of the product, and that really doesn't work. And so we're trying to simplify that entire model. We're about 3/4 of the way through it. It's resonating really well with our customers. But it's really complex as well. And we're trying to make it very transparent, because that's the other thing that we've heard from brands is just be transparent. Like tell us, because back to distributors, I think distributors are transparent. They're just not good at being transparent, right? They're not good at sharing why things are happening and why these costs are flowing down to the brand. And I agree, some of them are not fair or right, but in most cases, if they just, were able to communicate that, brands would understand what those costs are. We're trying to do the same with our new pricing model.
Yeah. So I'm going to dig into what a landed cost is a little bit more, just in case there's someone listening who's not totally sure.
Yeah.
That landed cost is the price that the store will pay for the product and delivery, all bundled into one price.
Exactly.
What that means for the brand is that they're selling their product and shipping it for essentially a flat price, but they need to make sure that that price covers their shipping.
You got it. Exactly.
Right? Because that still may fluctuate a bit, right? Depending on how much you're sending and, things of that nature, how you're sending it, et cetera.
Yep. You nailed it. And it's, it's essentially what happens with a distributor too. I mean, I pay a price for something at my store from a distributor, and it's landed. Once it's in the store, that's the cost, and I know how much to mark it up. We're trying to emulate that with this dropship model.
Yeah. I think the thing that gets complicated with distribution from the brand side is you have like KeHE, for example, you have 3 options for how to get your product to the distributor and then to the store. And so there's, do you want to work with your own freight company? And then we've got fees for that. Do you want us to do it? And the fees can fluctuate, or do you want to state a price and that is it? And hopefully it doesn't cost you more than what you're estimating, to ship it. So it's complicated from the brand side, especially if you're new, right? And that's another area where it's like, when you're doing it for the first time as a small brand, there's not a lot of, it's almost like the folks at the distributor forget that the people they're talking to have no idea
100%
what all of this means and how to make the best decision for their brand.
Yep. I've been in this industry for 4 years, and you're right. It's still complex to me in many cases, because there are so many options. There are so many variabilities that, these are small companies, and there's risk, and a big order going wrong or something not, getting a distributor and not selling as much as you forecasted. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What haven't we talked about yet that you want people to know about Mable or what you guys are up to?
I think we're honestly most excited about what we talked about a little bit, which is, there's this real opportunity to get these better for you, better made brands in front of more consumers. I have 3 kids. There's so many times where I go into, or they're teenagers now, so they don't really listen to me. But when they were younger, going to a C-store and, them trying to buy something, and, you sort of cave, and it's, wow, there's 56 grams of sugar in this. So it's frustrating as a parent. But to your point, it's frustrating because there's a cost to it as well. And it's interesting, a lot of our brands, I'll pick on them a little bit, like, well, I don't know if I want my brand in a C-store, I don't, just kind of a dirty C-store. Well, I totally get that. But we're trying to change the market. And we're seeing a lot of these C-stores, not a lot, but a good portion of them really transforming themselves. All Town Fresh is a perfect example, owned by global partners. You go into these stores and you feel like you're in a Wegmans. I mean, they're beautiful. You get an iced oat milk latte over here. You get this Wagyu beef bowl, and you pick up these amazing snacks that Mable has. There's 20 of them, I think, in New England.
Okay.
So that we're seeing the transformation happening. Obviously, we want it to move faster. but we remain excited about, how big that market is and how many stores we can get these brands into.
Yeah. What's interesting, so something that crossed my mind when you're saying, how some brands think about a C-store and like, I don't want my product in a C-store. We talk so much about like finding where your customer is,
Yeah.
right? You want to be on shelf where folks who want to buy your product or can afford your product or whatever it might be, where they shop. And when you say C-store, that has a very specific like 7-Eleven
Yes.
image that
Yes.
goes with it. But the reality is that there are independent stores, and also like you're talking about regional, um, convenience store chains that are doing things differently. So
Yes.
perhaps there's just a bit of education around what is the evolution of that part of the
Yep.
industry, and how are they changing? I think that that's a
Yep.
pretty unique thing that I'd actually like to explore.
Yeah.
Because we see out here, there's I forget the name and I feel terrible that I forget the name, but it's all sort of like the better for you small brand snacks, right? So, it's more diverse selection than what you find at a grocery store that still has the like really, big names in it. And it's far more, you know, um, far larger of an offering than what a traditional convenience store would have. And they're quite popular, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
And it's a variety of things, not just chips and drinks, but, other things as well that you might want to put in your pantry, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some, the challenging piece of this is going to be consumer education. To your point, the perception of C-store is, ooh, there's not anything in there that I can buy for me or
Mhm.
my kids. And now you're walking into some of these stores that Mable is working with, and there's this like beautiful end cap, and with just the fun part, which is this cool little snack with kind of the fun part of an ice cream cone, but the bottom is like the best
Yeah,
part.
that's
Um,
fun.
and Yes Bar and Righteous Felon beef jerky, which is amazing, and Pan's mushroom jerky. Whoever thought I would be eating veggie vegan mushroom jerky?
Yeah.
But it's really tasty, and
Yeah.
so there's a lot of consumer education that needs to happen
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah. And that's a conversation that we're hoping to have here too, is like, that, but pans, I mean, that's even compared to meat jerky that it hangs on, in the stores out here, it's sort of hanging like at the end of an aisle next to others. It's the price point is higher, right?
Sure.
And so it's like, you will have your vegans or your vegetarians who are going to go for that, right? And they've got their reasons for that, but the average shopper
Yep.
may not understand the why
Yep.
behind,
Right.
the price point of that. And I think, I hope that we can figure out ways to communicate, you
Yeah.
know, real price of food and value to
Yeah.
folks.
I know it's a great point. I mean, it's amazing to think about it, but a lot of people don't understand that a product with less sugar and less bad ingredients is actually better for you and better for your health, and so they don't equate price to, oh, this is I'm putting something better for me and my body.
Yeah.
So,
I think too, I talked recently about the misconception, and you may have thought about this too prior to owning your store. You like assume that whatever the product is selling for on the shelf, $11, right? The brand is getting half.
right.
The
Yeah.
brand gets half of that job. It's like it couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah.
So it's a much much tinier fraction. And so I think that plays a role into sort of like price perception on the shelf when people, for however we got to this point where like that's what we think
Yes.
is reality. It's like, I'm not, they're they're getting 650 for this or 550 for this. No way, that's too much money. They're overcharging. It's like
Right.
not even close.
Yeah.
um
Very true. It's very true.
and I don't know how we educate consumers more. I mean, we try to do it in our little corner of the internet by putting out facts and information, about how the industry works from that, to the consumer. And hopefully that'll get more and more reach. But I also know that as people hear, this podcast and their friends in the industry are learning more about how this industry actually works and what the margins actually are throughout the supply chain, they then go and tell their friends and their family and their community. And so hopefully it'll spread that way.
Yeah. And
Well,
you can get these brands into more and more places, then their own ingredients costs go down. And like there's this multiplier effect that happens that's good for all of us.
yeah.
But you're absolutely right to point out that price point in general for a lot of these specialty emerging brands is prohibitive for some people. And that will be more acute, certainly in the C-store space.
Yeah. Interesting. But I think there is a market there, and it's awesome that there is platforms like Mable that can help facilitate growth and expansion at a lower cost than perhaps traditional distribution.
Exactly.
And the fact that you're leaning into the transition and helping brands make the move to distribution, I think is really, really cool. And I'm excited to sort of stay in touch with how things are going there. I
Yeah.
also love that you're focusing on grocery.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of value in the fact that you can zero in on one industry and not be home goods and grocery and clothing and all of those things, because each of those industries is completely different in the way
Massive.
that they operate.
Yep. Massive and hard. And yeah, I mean, groceries really, like we were talking about today, groceries just really complex, which has been hard for us and a lot to figure out. But now that I think we understand all the dynamics, and now that we've brought the distributor into our strategy, I think we feel really confident about where we're headed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
If a brand founder is listening and they're thinking, maybe Mable might be the right spot for me, where do they go to learn more, and what should they consider before onboarding?
Yeah, go to our website. It's Meet Mable, MEETMABLE. And there's a simple application form. We do a pretty careful job vetting brands. We love early brands, but sometimes they're too early. You certainly have to have a product and proper packaging and some evidence that you've already done your own selling into stores. But we really do take on early stage brands. So we have a whole team that helps with onboarding and makes it super easy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. Well, Arik, this has been really informative and really enlightening. It's been so fun to hear how Mable is evolving and what you all are trying to do to support the grocery industry and small brands and small stores within the industry. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah. You.
I hope that you'll keep me posted
Yeah.
about your progress. And we've got the Good Food CFO community, and we'd love to have you in the community to talk more about Mable and to give us updates on the progress of this program that you're working on.
Yeah, wonderful. We would love to come back, and we'll keep you posted on these big partnerships we're working on. And let's circle back for a demo as well.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Arik. Have a good one.
Sarah.
Mable will be joining me inside the Good Food CFO community for a live demo and Q&A session. This event will be open to Good Food CFO Plus members only. So if you're not yet a member, visit thegoodfoodcfo.com/join or click on the link in the show notes to become a monthly or annual member today. As always, I am so grateful to have spent time with you here. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. That is the #1 way to help more good food founders find the show. I'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.